Welcome to our LinkedIn Live broadcast on the release of the ISM Manufacturing PMI Report. My name is Dan Zeiger. I'm a senior writer and editor for Inside Supply Management, which is ISM's member publication. And hope it's starting to finally feel like fall wherever you are as we discuss the manufacturing PMI for September. Production output grew, but new orders sagged. Employment stayed in contraction and prices remained high as panelists' tariffs anxiety continued, which I know is not a big surprise to anybody. It all added up to the manufacturing PMI ticking up only a bit to 49.1%. That's a seventh straight month in contraction territory. There's a lot to discuss, so let's say hi to Susan Spence. She's the chair of the ISM Manufacturing Business Survey Committee. And as she said on an earlier media call this morning, there's a lot of news happening today, and you could be a lot of other places, but we're happy that you're spending time with us. Hi, Sue. How you doing? And what stood out to you about the manufacturing PMI data for September?
Good morning, afternoon, and evening to people listening, hopefully around the world. What stood out really wasn't the uptick. 0.4 is not a lot. What stood out to me were a few things. The fact that the production number went into expansion, and that hasn't happened in a while. That made sense to me, as I've said earlier today, because we had a new order uptick last month. So I feel like we're seeing little blips on the radar screen, but nothing that's going to indicate that it would be sustainable. So what is interesting is what's consistent. So as you said, we're in the seventh month of this. We have had contraction, we've had slight increases and then back down. The other thing that really caught my eye was the new export orders that went down 4.6 points, 4.6 percentage points. That's a pretty big drop. It's totally in keeping with what our panelists have said is going on, especially with their international customers. So we continue to have this weak situation right now, and only, slight upticks on the radar that doesn't look like they're going to hold. Yeah.
A couple of index readings in particular, and I will give you the exact numbers as our viewers, the exact numbers as I read the question. As you noted, production was in expansion. It was up 3.2 percentage points to 51% in September. But new orders, inventories, and backlogs, they were all remained in contraction or moved into contraction. New orders at 48.9, inventories at 47.7, and the backlog at 46.2. And I noted that because that was the exact same scenario that you raised red flags about in the first report that you did back when you were chair back in May. I mean, are there similar worries this time because of those dynamics?
The worry I would pile on top of all the other worries is that it's continued to go on, and we're in the seventh month. We know in manufacturing that we see the stress first, and then it goes on to other sectors. Services would be a good one to watch. So I've been reflecting about how long this has gone on for, and when I was in the strategic sourcing game myself, if you had a bad situation and you had to think about resourcing and going elsewhere for your product, you likely didn't wait 6 or 7 months to do it. So I wonder about the customers of our panelists finally deciding enough is enough and taking the plunge to just go elsewhere for the product. I know that's their worry because they're telling us that's their worry. And so we're not talking about folks going to other U.S. Manufacturers. We're talking about them avoiding us, right? So no one has said that, although the demand sentiment is soft. But that's what I would be thinking about if I were an international customer and said, I'm getting punished for doing business with the U.S., so I'm just not going to. So I worry about that because of the length of time this has gone on for. We were hopeful, I think it was in May or maybe even April, that by July, there was a timeline, if you recall, back then, by July, there were things that were going to be settled, and it seems that nothing's been settled. So companies continue to not hire. They continue to be consumed by tariff talk, and the sentiment, even though there's some slight improvement in some of the sub-indexes, the sentiment is still quite negative.
Yeah. And we also have a shutdown to deal with, which we'll talk about it at some point. That was the breaking news, of course, that we were talking about in our introduction. But we'll stick with some of the maladies that have been plaguing manufacturers for a few months now. The prices index was at 61.9% in September, and if you're looking for a ray of sunshine, that was an indication of some relief. That was actually the lowest reading since 54.9% in January. It's dropped 7.9 percentage points since April, but the sentiment in the comments, as you pointed out, there's not much relief out there. There was one survey respondent that said very plainly, steel tariffs are killing us. And as you might imagine, I'll share another comment with you because they were, always profound and compelling, and we'll get to that. But yeah, talk about the prices index a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one could speculate that maybe the tariff worry has now been built in, but we know not everyone has passed those price increases along, and there are more increases to come if the threats become reality. And then there's the whole unknown of who's next, what industry is next, what country is next, and that uncertainty continues to drive people to not invest, not hire, and do what they have to, as one panelist said, to keep overhead as low as possible, because if they have to increase their cost of goods sold because they're getting hit with increases, they have to find a way to reduce it. I think there's one of the comments that you cited. It was a very long comment. It was very thoughtful, and it nicely packaged everything that folks are worried about. So that's what these panelists are saying. We need to believe them, and we need to worry. And again, what would make it all get better right away? Well, nothing will make it get better right away. But if we start to see the stability and people believe it, then the worm will start to turn, as the phrase goes a little bit. It's taken us 7 months to get here. It won't take us 1 month to turn it around, but we do hope that something is going to settle down here. But that's a hope.
Yeah.
There's not data backing the hope up at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah. Hope is not a plan, as the saying goes. That comment that Susan was referring to, she read my mind, as I guess it was really kind of a no-brainer, because it really stood out for those of you that read the report, and I will share it with you right now. It's from a respondent in transportation equipment, and he or she wrote that business continues to be severely depressed. Profits are down, and extreme taxes, tariffs, are being shouldered by all companies in our space. We've increased price pressures both to inputs and customer outputs as companies are starting to pass on tariffs via surcharges, raising prices up to 20%. The comment concludes that we believe we are in a stagflation period where prices are up, but orders are down due to tariff policy. And again, customers are not willing to pay the higher prices, so they're just not buying. We're continuing to find ways to reduce overhead, which means letting go of experienced workers. I'll give you a two-part question, Sue. I mean, number one, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, that's pretty, cut and dried right there but number two, as you were talking and you were commenting about fears that international buyers might go elsewhere for a product. I mean, we've seen the news with soybeans about how China has done some strategic buying from other nations, not the U.S. on that. I mean, I know it's probably putting the cart in front of the horse a little bit, but I mean, is there any fear in the manufacturing sector that there could be a similar situation?
Yeah, there absolutely is. All you need to do is look at the comments on our new order questions, and the demand. There's something we measure on demand softening, and for every person that sees a positive story for demand, there's two that say no. It's not happening. There are people, we're close enough to the end of the year. People are starting to say, fourth quarter's dead. Hopefully 2026 is better. And some even saying 2026 doesn't look to be better. So as I said earlier, if you are not being treated well, there's a phrase that I heard a few months ago. I like to repeat: capital goes where it's being treated well. And so soybeans is a great example. Folks are saying, okay, it looks like this isn't going to end anytime soon. So the smart thing to do to keep the risk of, in this case, price increase down, is to go elsewhere. That's what I would do as a purchasing strategic sourcing manager, because I had a responsibility to ensure that I don't erode at my company's profit margin by just taking these increases. So if folks can go elsewhere, they're going to go elsewhere. And we're 7 months in, and yeah, we're pretty worried about what we continue to see. And you know, the indexes are not just a whim; they're based on what people on the front lines are saying is happening. So let's believe it. Mm-hmm. And hopefully the right people will be believing it and consider it strongly as the next economic policy is being formulated.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss two more pieces of evidence. You cited them when you gave your overview, the new export orders and the import indexes. It's easy to forget now. I mean, those were both in expansion in March, and they've dropped a combined 16.3 percentage points, if my math is correct, since. Exports has contracted for 7 straight months and imports 6. Trade tensions, of course, have a lot to do with that, if not everything to do with that. To give you the exact numbers, new export orders, 43% in September. You know, that as you cited in earlier calls today, just for a 1 month drop, that is significant. That's down 4.6 percentage points. And imports was at 44.7%. That's down from 46% in August. You know, what's there to add there? And just, you know, I know you had said in the past when we've discussed these, you know, it's likely going to get worse before it gets better. Anything to add to that?
You know, the thing I would add is a question to the universe and anyone who cares to listen. How much longer will we tolerate or be able to tolerate these kind of numbers before we will understand that it won't get better unless something changes to make people want to come here for their work? I totally understand the strategy about, you know, motivating countries and companies to build U.S. facilities, which helps our employment. And it's not happening in a big way right now. I know there are certain deals that you can read about that is going on, but the question of the universe is, you know, is that strategy going to, you know, come to fruition and be beneficial in time before these, you know, we have 67% of manufacturing GDP in contraction and 28 and strong. You know, how much higher is that going to go before, you know, there is a realization or a belief, maybe, if you will, that these policies are hurting. They are not helping. So it's a question. I don't have an answer to it. I just know that our panelists, and we thank them, are very steadfast in what they're saying is going on. And it is very similar sector to sector. You know, there are some bright spots, of course, but transportation equipment's a great example. You know, we used to say transportation services industry, like the one I was on when I went to FedEx, we'd see things first, moving goods across the country. You see a downtick, it says something about what was going on with the economy. Well, this is the equipment, right, that moves those things. So we need to be paying attention. And as this panelist had said, customers just aren't willing to pay the price. They're just not buying, right? So that's something to really think about and hopefully contemplate and, you know, understand if another rate cut is going to really help that. I don't believe it will because the prices, as this panelist talked about, 20% increase. It's not 3. It's not 1 or 2. It's 20. It's 45. It's 32. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You'd mentioned, and I just thought of this as you were talking. You know, the customer inventories index in recent months. I mean, we've been talking about that. You know, at some point, you know, companies or customers are going to have to reorder, but yet the last few months, that number is getting lower and lower and lower. Has it been a surprise, you know, that it's been going down this long and it doesn't seem to have any positive movement?
It's not a surprise when you look at the number in context of the comments. And that's what I love about a report. You know, the number is the number, but then you have to add the context of what are people saying. And, you know, we've only included 10 comments here, so our report isn't, you know, 1 million pages long, but there are many, many, many more. many more comments about the same sort of thing. And so for some industries, customers have to reorder because I guess they cannot do without the product. But, there's others that they're just not going to do it. I'll live with, my fleet for a little while longer. I'll live with, what I have in my kitchen and not do my reno for longer because I don't know, what the price is going to be by the time I start my project. And maybe I don't know if I'm going to have my job, right? It's really, really scary. You saw the ADP numbers today. It's the only employment data we have right now because of the shutdown. 20 years. Yeah. 20 years. It's crazy, crazy low.
With all that, we have, as of midnight, we have a federal government shutdown to also contend with. Obviously, the data for September was compiled before, it was speculated, but it had not happened yet, of course. We'll see how that affects the sector in October. Discuss the potential impacts of a shutdown. I know you earlier today, you related back to your experience in the aviation industry and how that affected, inspections and whatnot.
Right.
Just talk about how that could, sure, impact manufacturing.
Yeah, and it depends again on the sector. The one I, recall, obviously in defense sector, if you did not have your government DCAA, they were called, inspectors in there signing off certain product, which they have to do, whether it was a helicopter itself or a component, then you weren't shipping, right? I remember had to work very hard to reduce all areas of overhead spending while the shutdown was going on because we weren't able to ship for a period of time, right? So the industry sectors, perhaps those federal employees are going to be deemed essential and continue to go to work. But I remember being quite surprised at the time that we couldn't get the government inspectors that were assigned to our suppliers to sign off on flight-worthy hardware. Instead of coming twice a week, they were coming twice a month. Things like that could be going on, I suppose, in, if there's FDA inspections going on. So if you think through the sectors, they could have very direct implications for folks that have been furloughed, right? And, of course, now then there's this discussion about there's going to be even more permanent cuts. So some of these sectors are also going to be battered by an impact there. Don't know what the size of it will be. I read something this morning about how normally the U.S. Economy or the U.S. Shutdown would not be this, big impact or cause the worry around the world. But because it's on top of all the other things going on, it just makes for a really, really negative environment. Last thing we needed right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll get to, I'm sure we will discuss that in the impacts in the October report. And based on the news that I've been hearing today, there may still be a shutdown by the next time we convene here. We will see. The other big news in the last month was obviously the Fed met a couple weeks ago and gave us the interest rate reduction that businesses had been clamoring for. We Inside Supply Management had a story to that effect, which I believe our friend Christina will drop in the comments here. The sentiment there was that, look, there's just too much uncertainty with everything else that's been going on, what we've been talking about. It's not going to have much of an impact. And as you had noted earlier, one of the comments, the survey respondents pretty much said something to that effect as well. I know we've discussed it and we don't expect any great shakes from it. But yeah, just elaborate.
I read all the comments. There's hundreds and hundreds of them. Mm-hmm. I don't think there was anybody saying, thank goodness for this interest rate cut. Now we can, now we're on our way. Just haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that it was because of the size of the cut. It's dwarfed by these tariff concerns. When you're talking, as I said earlier, 20, 25, 35% increases because of, X% tariff on whatever commodity or country they're buying from, a half a point and a half, it's not going to make up for it, right? it would be nice if that was the silver bullet. It's not. And so I'm not sure how much more or how much clearer we can be about what is driving these numbers. And these panelists are telling us, and we need to please listen to them. And, not that people aren't taking it seriously, but please believe it. I just don't see anything, even with that production uptick, I don't see anything that tells me we're going to sustain anything. And I can't wait for that day. I would love to give good news.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing this since May. I feel like I haven't been able to give good news. I would love to, but good news is not to be had until, the stability starts to happen and certainty starts to happen. Our panelists are clear. Thank goodness for them. They're very clear on what it's going to take.
Yeah. Well, you alluded to something. I'll bring it up. I wasn't planning to, which was, unless we had time, but we should discuss it, which is really funny. I wasn't planning to bring up employment, but in light of a point you made, we had the ADP report today, and the exact number was a loss of 32,000 jobs. And as you pointed out, that and our index numbers may be the only employment data we get this week. So let's talk about that. The employment index improved a little bit, but it was still in contraction, 45.3. It was up from 43.8% in August. And of course, you have the ratios on the hire to fire comments that you can discuss. But just give us the lay of the land there.
Well, not only was the ADP numbers dire, but I think I read that they just revised August.
Mm-hmm.
So, those numbers, what was it, 155?
While you're talking, I'm going to look it up. They revised it. It was down 3,000 in August.
Versus they originally reported 50, up 55?
54, 55, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So you know what that reminded me of? Mm-hmm. That reminded me of the drop with the BLS.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't it about that kind of ratio?
It was pretty dramatic. Yeah.
It was. So, that's a data point for you. Mm-hmm. So again, it makes sense because of what our panelists are telling us. For every person hiring, or I'm finally hiring, I'm finally filling, there's 3 that are not. Mm-hmm. The other thing I thought about, and no one mentioned it, so this is just something that popped in my head. So, there's certain companies that enjoy the employees that they have on H-1B visas. Incredibly hardworking folks, incredibly bright. I had always had, especially at UTC, I had some wonderful, wonderful staff that came to this country, got into the lottery, went and got either their financial degree, technical degree, and now there's a fee. And so I wonder if that's the next thing that maybe we're going to be seeing, right? So the jobs report is scary, the private jobs report now, because that's all we have, but it's absolutely consistent with what these companies are seeing. And so, again, it makes perfect sense. It's a tough story, but makes perfect sense. Your new orders aren't coming in. Your prices are going up. You have tariff uncertainty. Your backlog is down. Your production is down. Who's going to hire in those circumstances? People are not going to hire because they don't know if they're going to have the work to employ them, or they have to reserve SG&A costs because they may have to funnel their funds into, higher prices for their inputs. So it makes sense that these numbers are going in a consistent direction. And I don't believe that we could say the ADP doesn't know what they're doing, and the ADP, doesn't have a good formula for figuring out its payroll ads. It's data reported. They're a payroll company. So I'm not laughing because it's funny. It's not. But it is what it is based on the uncertainty. So again, it's yet one more signal that companies are giving. This is why. Mm-hmm. We know why. We know what it will take to turn it around. We just need the will to turn it around, right?
Mm-hmm. You had alluded to earlier the percentage of manufacturing GDP in contraction. It was 67%. In September, that was actually a slight improvement from August, 69. The share in strong contraction, you pointed out, 28%. We define strong contraction as a personal PMI calculation for that industry of 45% or lower. 28%, that was up from 4% in August. Just discuss that. And also, I've asked you a lot about industry performance in the last few months. Chemical products in particular, we've been keeping a close eye on. That contracted for a 5th month in a row. And as you pointed out, only one of the big 6 industries, that was petroleum and coal products, expanded in September, where the other 5 contracted.
Yeah.
I mean, more troubling trends, just discuss that.
Yeah, the contraction is concerning strong contraction, and that strong contraction, before it was 4, it was a whole lot higher than 4, and it seems to be creeping back up there. And the fact, if you take just new orders alone, the expansion in new orders, meaning someone with a new order index above 50, are, it's not including the big 6, none. So the big 6 industries, food and beverage, transportation equipment, computer, electronic products, chemical products, machinery, petroleum, that's 72% of the GDP. It's not that the others don't matter, but the big 6 are the big 6. And if you've got no expansion in new orders, only 1 not contracting, that's very, very worrisome. So when I say there are patterns and things are happening across industries, that's what I mean. Those are very different things, but they are all giving us the same reasons: tariffs, uncertainty, lack of orders. Again, the story is very clear of what's happening here.
Yeah. Well,
they go. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mm-hmm.
Chemical products are in everything. What is it not in?
Yeah.
In everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a very common input across the board is in contraction or strong contraction, that's going to creep in. It's a big input cost.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, Susan. It's been a great discussion, a sobering discussion at times, as the previous months have been, but I learned a lot, as I always do. I mean, anything that I didn't ask or anything that we haven't talked about that you think might be important to include before we wrap up?
I'll try to end on an optimistic note. Why should anyone believe it's going to be anything but a disaster? My belief, despite everything you read about, is that eventually data is the thing that people will listen to. Mm-hmm. So just keep giving us the data. We'll keep encouraging our elected officials and business folks to use data, mm-hmm. right? There is there's a couple of things I used to have hanging on my wall in my office. One was seek truth. Another one is, I have charts and graphs and data, so go away. And it was a little meaner than go away. but you have to pay attention to information, mm-hmm. right? You can speculate, that's fine, but be scientific, be science-based, be data-driven, right? And, if you do that and make decisions based on that, then we'll be okay. Yeah. So please keep pushing for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could share the initials that, for the finish of your sign there, but I think people have a pretty good idea of what that sign said. So we'll just leave it at that. But thank you. Yeah, thank you, Sue. I appreciate it. It was a great discussion as always. Hey, before we go, I want to repeat a couple announcements from last month about the September-October issue of Inside Supply Management, which we have a feature story on the value of the ISM PMI reports and how the data has been very, very forward-looking this year. Comments from Sue and our other chairs and on how companies can use the data as well. And Sue also wrote the Voices column about her experience as the new Manufacturing Business Survey Committee chair. You can check those out at ismworld.org/magazine. For more information, feel free to go to ismworld.org, where you can read the roundup article that details a lot of what Sue and I have discussed here. And if you want to be a part of the ISM or manufacturing or services business survey panels that compile data for the ISM PMI reports, visit ismworld.org/join the panel for more information. So join us on Friday when we break down the ISM Services PMI report with Steve Miller. He's the chair of ISM Services Business Survey Committee. So for Sue Spence and the people who helped us behind the scenes, Christina Cahill and Jennifer Stevens, I'm Dan Zeiger. We'll see you next time.